You might not realize the exact moment it happens. There's no alarm going off, no dramatic sign in the sky. It's subtle, quiet, almost polite. One day you're in your 20s, full of potential, options, attention, possibility. People look at you and see who you could become. And then somewhere after 30, something changes. You walk into a room and suddenly no one looks twice. Not in a cruel way. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because the world has silently shifted its expectations. You're not becoming anymore. You're supposed to already be something. And if you aren't, if your career isn't impressive enough, your confidence not sharp enough, your achievements not shiny enough, you don't get judged. You get ignored. That's the part nobody warns men about. Not in school, not from family, not from society. There's no class that says, around 30, the world will stop asking what you dream of and start demanding what you've already built. The attention that was once effortless becomes conditional. Conditional on status, on competence, on usefulness. And this hits differently because men rarely talk about it. Not openly, not honestly. It's not dramatic enough to complain about, but painful enough to change you. You notice it in social circles. You notice it at work. You especially notice it in dating. People stop being curious about you. They stop asking, what do you want to do? And replace it with, so what do you do? Your value becomes a resume. And the strangest part? It doesn't happen because you got worse. It happens because the world assumes you should already be better. Some men deal with it by working harder. Some numb themselves. Some isolate. Some pretend not to care. But almost every man feels that silent shift. From possibility to expectation. From attention to invisibility. And once you feel it, it becomes impossible to unfeel. This story isn't about blaming society. It's not about self-pity. It's not about turning bitterness into identity. It's about something deeper. What happens to a man when he realizes the world doesn't see him anymore, and what he chooses to do about it. Because that turning point can break you, or it can remake you. And if you've ever felt invisible in your career, in relationships, even in your own home, this story will hit uncomfortably close. Because for men, invisibility doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in slowly, and then one day, you wake up and realize you're standing in a crowd, but no one is looking for you. In your 20s, the world feels wide open. People tell you you're young, you have time, you can try things, fail, switch directions, reinvent yourself. There's an invisible spotlight that follows you, not because you've earned it, but because everyone assumes you will. But after 30, something shifts. The spotlight doesn't shut off. It simply moves to someone younger, hungrier, shinier, someone who still fits the narrative of potential. You don't notice the moment it leaves you. Not at first. It begins with tiny details. Your messages get shorter replies. Invitations become rare. People stop checking in. Coworkers stop asking about your weekend. Family stops asking about your plans. Women stop looking back at you in public. You haven't changed, but the way the world relates to you has. You start to realize that nobody cares about your journey anymore. They only care about your results. Nobody is impressed by, I'm working on myself. Nobody applauds, I'm figuring things out. Nobody celebrates, I'm trying. That was acceptable at 22, expected at 25, still forgivable at 28. But at 32, trying begins to sound like failing. You might have friends your age who already have families, houses, stable jobs, structured lives. And you're not jealous, but you can't ignore what happens next. People compare you to them, quietly, subtly, but undeniably. You begin to feel like you're falling behind in a race you didn't even know you were running. A race where nobody tells you the rules until you've already broken them. Even in dating, the script changes. Women don't look for potential in a 30-plus man. They look for stability, direction, capability. And if you don't have those things yet, it's not a small compromise for them. It's a deal breaker. For the first time in your life, you begin to understand something older men have known for decades. A man's value is not granted by existence. It is earned. Every day, relentlessly. And the world never explains this. It just expects you to get it. It's a shock the first time you feel it. That moment when you realize you've become just another background character in other people's stories. Someone stable enough to rely on, but not fascinating enough to look at. Your 20s felt like a hallway with endless doors. Your 30s feel like a room with only one exit, and everyone is watching to see whether you find it. But here's the truth no one tells you. You're not invisible because you're unworthy. You're invisible because the world now waits to see what you build, how you rise, what you choose, what you can withstand, who you can become without applause. Men don't lose the spotlight after 30. They're a new one, a stronger one, a heavier one, a spotlight that doesn't illuminate potential. It exposes truth. And the question becomes, what will you do with that truth? There's a moment. Every man hits it differently, but once it happens, you never forget it. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It doesn't come with music or thunder. It's a quiet moment. Maybe you're sitting alone in your apartment. Maybe you're driving home from work. Maybe you're brushing your teeth at midnight, staring at your own reflection, wondering when you started looking this tired. And it hits you like a cold wave. No one is coming. No mentor. No miracle. No lucky break. No unexpected opportunity. Just you. Your hands. Your mind. Your choices. Your consequences. Every responsibility feels heavier now. Bills. Health. Career. Future. Relationships. Family expectations. The weight didn't change. You just became aware that you're the only one carrying it. This realization creates a very specific kind of panic. Not loud, not chaotic, but deep, silent, suffocating. A panic that whispers, what if I'm too late? What if I'm not enough? What if this is it? What if I don't become the man I thought I'd be? You don't collapse, you don't scream, you don't break. Men rarely break outwardly. Instead, you keep going. You show up to work. You pay your bills. You smile when people ask how you are. You say, all good, even when nothing feels good. And the world believes you, because men are expected to hold everything silently. The crazy part? You could be surrounded by people and still feel like you're solving life alone. Because after 30, men stop talking about their struggles. Not because they don't want to, but because they've seen the way the world reacts when they do. Admit stress, everyone's stressed. Admit loneliness, focus on yourself. Admit fear, be a man. Admit failure, silence. So you swallow it, all of it. And quietly, you begin to detach. You respond less. You socialize less. You trust less. You reveal less. Not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion. You stop expecting anyone to understand your internal world. You stop relying on people emotionally. You stop opening up because opening up feels like giving the world ammunition. And this detachment becomes misinterpreted. They call you cold. They call you distant. They call you withdrawn. But they don't see the truth. You didn't shut people out. You just realized nobody was really coming in. This is the invisible collapse many men experience after 30, not a breakdown, but a slow retreat into themselves. And that retreat is dangerous because it convinces you that this loneliness is permanent, that this pressure is normal, that this silence is simply how life is. But it's not. This isn't the end of your story. This is the turning point. Because before a man rises, he always faces the moment that forces him to rebuild, not out of motivation, but out of necessity. Men aren't forged through support. They're forged through pressure. And pressure is exactly what you're feeling now. There's something men learn after 30 that nobody warns them about. You don't become irrelevant overnight. You fade slowly, quietly, almost politely. It starts small. People stop asking for your opinion, not because they disrespect you, but because they simply assume you'll figure things out. At work, younger coworkers get praise for simply showing up, while your consistency becomes expected, invisible, like the office chores no one thinks about until one breaks. Friends text less. Family checks in less. People stop being curious about your life. Not out of malice, but because men aren't seen as people who need to be checked on. You become the one others lean on, but rarely the one anyone leans toward. And the shift is subtle. You hold the door for someone, they walk through without noticing. You give advice, they ignore it, then return when everything falls apart. You help fix something, they thank you once and forget about it instantly. You show up every time, and somehow that becomes the reason they stop valuing it. Invisibility isn't a moment. It's a pattern, a slow erasing. The world doesn't attack you. It just stops seeing you. And the worst part? You start disappearing from yourself as well. You stop celebrating your own achievements because no one else does. You stop acknowledging your effort because the world treats it like a baseline. You stop asking what you want because wanting feels selfish. You stop expressing needs because needs make you weak. You shrink. You speak less. You emote less. You expect less. A man becomes invisible not when society rejects him, but when he starts believing that nothing about him is worth noticing. And there's a reason this happens more intensely after 30. You're no longer the potential. You're no longer the future. You're no longer promising. You're just a man, expected to perform, expected to endure, expected to exist without acknowledgement. Women may fear aging for beauty. Men fear aging for relevance. Because once you're past 30, the world stops rooting for you. Nobody says he'll find himself. Nobody says he's still figuring life out. Nobody says he has potential. Instead, they start measuring you by results. Where's your career? Where's your stability? Where's your discipline? Where's your confidence? Where's your money? Where's your direction? It's not cruelty. It's the silent contract men are born into. You provide value or you disappear. And slowly, gradually, quietly, many men disappear. Not because they're weak, not because they failed, not because they didn't try, but because they've spent so long giving that they forgot what it feels like to be seen. Here's the part nobody talks about. Invisibility is reversible, but only after a man understands what caused it. Not society, not women, not age, not circumstance, but the moment he started believing that blending into the background was safer than taking up space in the world. The moment he chose silence over expression. The moment he accepted being overlooked as normal. The moment he stopped demanding more from life. Most men don't need to become someone new. They need to remember who they were before the world convinced them to disappear. And that journey begins in the next turning point. Every man has a moment, a single, private, invisible moment, when the weight becomes too heavy to pretend everything is fine. For some men, it happens on a random Tuesday night. For others, it's during the drive home, when the music is off, the road is empty, and there's nothing left to distract the mind from itself. It rarely looks dramatic. There's no screaming, no breaking things, no dramatic breakdown. Sometimes the breaking point is just a man sitting in his car in a parking lot long after he's turned off the engine, unable to make himself open the door. The world thinks men collapse loudly, but the truth is, men collapse quietly. Invisible stress, invisible pressure, invisible expectations, invisible exhaustion. And because nobody sees it, nobody intervenes. It's not a single event that breaks him, it's the accumulation. Years of being the reliable one. Years of being the strong one. Years of being the one who doesn't complain. Years of being the emotional shock absorber for everyone else. Men don't explode. They erode, piece by piece, responsibility by responsibility, obligation by obligation, until one day, something tiny pushes them over the edge. A comment that wasn't meant to hurt. A task that wasn't meant to overwhelm. A moment of disrespect that wasn't meant to wound. But it does. Because it lands on top of a mountain that's been building silently for years. And here's what makes it worse. When a man finally collapses, people often respond with confusion. I didn't know you were struggling. Why didn't you say anything? You always seemed fine. But men did say something, just not in words. They said it when they stopped engaging, when they isolated, when they became quieter, when they worked longer hours, when their laughter disappeared, when their eyes looked tired even after sleeping. But society only hears men when they shout, and by the time a man shouts, he's already been in pain for years. The breaking point is rarely a crisis. It is usually a realization. Nobody is coming, not to rescue him, not to support him, not to ask what he needs, not to check if he's okay. That is the moment when a man truly becomes invisible, not to the world, but to himself. He stops believing his feelings matter. He stops believing his needs matter. He stops believing he matters. But here's the twist most people don't see. The breaking point is not the end. It is the beginning. Because collapse forces something no man ever gives himself willingly. Stillness, a pause, a confrontation with the truth. When everything falls apart quietly, it gives a man one rare, powerful opportunity to rebuild himself on his own terms. Not for validation, not for approval, not for expectations, not for performance, but for survival, for clarity, for identity, for self-respect. Men don't rise because life gets easier. Men rise because falling finally reveals what was breaking them all along. After years of carrying invisible burdens, something subtle shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough to make a man pause and think. I don't have to keep disappearing. It might be a quiet moment, waking up earlier than usual, taking a deep breath before responding to the same old demands, or looking at his reflection and realizing he's no longer willing to ignore his own needs. This is the turning point. It doesn't feel heroic. There's no crowd cheering, no applause, no immediate relief. But the change begins internally. He starts to say no, not rudely, not aggressively, but with intention. He chooses priorities differently. Work no longer defines him. Obligations are evaluated for value, not guilt. Relationships are measured by mutual respect, not convenience. This is where strength grows, not from effort or endurance, but from boundaries, from awareness, from the courage to acknowledge. My time, my energy, my mind, they matter too. And it isn't always easy. There's guilt, there's doubt, there's resistance from those around him. Friends, family, colleagues, even partners who relied on the old version of him. You've changed. You're selfish. You're not the man you used to be. He has to hold firm, because reclaiming himself doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. It means redefining it, redesigning his life around what actually matters, and cutting out what only drains him. Small victories accumulate. He wakes up earlier and feels his mind clear. He exercises regularly because he wants to, not because someone told him to. He spends time with people who respect his boundaries. He says what he thinks instead of what he assumes others want to hear. And slowly, invisibility turns into presence. A quiet, deliberate presence. Not for attention, not for validation, but for himself. Men who reach this stage often describe it as liberation. Finally existing in the world on their terms, free from the invisible chains that once dictated every move. The most surprising part? Others notice, not because he seeks recognition, but because authenticity is magnetic. Respect replaces expectation. Relationships shift from transactional to meaningful. This is the power of the turning point. Falling apart quietly allows a man to rebuild intentionally. He stops being invisible. He stops being this silent sufferer. He starts being fully, unapologetically himself. Now, he has reached a stage where the lessons of invisibility and silent burden converge into daily practice. It isn't perfection. It isn't about always being strong or always having the answers. It's about awareness. Awareness of his limits. Awareness of his needs. Awareness of the difference between obligation and self-sacrifice. He begins to integrate this newfound clarity into every aspect of life. Career. He works smarter, not longer. He chooses projects that align with his skills and interests, not just to appease others. Meetings no longer drain him. They have purpose. The weight of unrecognized effort diminishes because he no longer carries the invisible burden of approval. Relationships, friendships become reciprocal. Romantic connections are no longer dependent on pleasing or accommodating at the cost of self. Family dynamics improve when he communicates honestly instead of silently absorbing stress. He notices respect grows naturally when boundaries are clear. Health in mind. Stress is no longer a constant companion. Exercise, nutrition, and sleep are approached as tools for energy and clarity, not obligations. Mental health is prioritized. He seeks help when needed instead of masking struggle. The invisible collapse that once loomed as inevitable is replaced by conscious resilience. But transformation is rarely linear. Old patterns attempt to come back. The pull to overcommit, overexert, and fade into the background remains. Each challenge is a reminder. The work of staying visible, intentional, and empowered is ongoing. The difference now is perspective. He recognizes the warning signs earlier. He pauses before automatically saying yes. He reflects before carrying someone else's weight. Each choice is deliberate. There is profound satisfaction in this subtle mastery of self. No applause, no external accolades, just the quiet knowledge that he is finally living on his own terms. And here's the unexpected reward. People start noticing not because he demands attention, but because authenticity draws respect. His presence has weight, not because of dominance, but because of integrity and self-possession. The final lesson, being the nice guy does not mean being invisible. Collapsing quietly does not mean failing. Walking away from unnecessary obligations, reclaiming boundaries, and living intentionally are the true markers of strength. For men struggling under invisible pressures, you are not alone. You are not weak. The weight you carry is real, but so is your capacity to turn it into power. By acknowledging the silent breaking points, navigating them deliberately, and integrating lessons into everyday life, men can transform invisibility into presence, pressure into clarity, and exhaustion into purposeful energy. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a life where invisible burdens are no longer invisible chains, where men thrive, not despite struggle, but because of the self-awareness struggle forced them to develop, where the quiet breaking points become the foundation for unstoppable growth.